If you're particularly astute, you'll have noticed that Nvidia have launched its RTX 4070, and there have been tons of rumours concerning the release date and performance targets of not only the 4060 but also the 4060 Ti. But much the same could not be said for RDNA 3's mid and low range offerings, with N33 and N32 being mysteriously absent, at least for desktop information from AMD. N32 of course targeting cards such as the RTX 4070, leaving gamers who are considering Team Red scratching their head and wondering, well, what's the story? Well, as you probably guessed, in this video I'm aiming to provide you guys some release date updates, performance targets, and some updated specifications for AMD's upcoming RDNA 3 GPUs, along with some bonus stuff as well. And we're going to get into all of this after this message from the video's sponsor. If you're running a copy of Windows 10 which isn't activated, of course, not only do you have to worry about the missing customization options, but there's also that annoying Windows desktop watermark reminding you to activate. Today's video is sponsored by WhoKeys.com, and they've an excellent price on Windows 10 Professional as well as Home keys. Yeah, and they also of course sell games. I've bought a few Windows 10 keys with my own personal account to test everything was legit and worked in preparation for this sponsored video. You can pick up one of their keys for 25% off using the coupon code RGT in the checkout. There's links to their website in the video description. Also, if you're building a few systems, there's bundles available too. Again, you can check out WhoKeys.com and use the coupon code RGT for 25% off the listed Windows 10 key prices. For those who missed the earlier rumours of RDNA 3, N32 is very similar to N31. It cuts the GCD size down, of course, to just 200mm. There's 30 workgroup processors or 60 legacy compute units versus 48 workgroup processors of N31, 4 MCDs versus 6 of N31, still the same process nodes. In fact, even the MCDs are identical. N33 though is monolithic. It's actually similar in size to just the single GCD of N32, but supports 128-bit bus and powers just 16 workgroup processors or up to 32 compute units. Officially, AMD have already disclosed a lot of N33 information, and honestly, many of these specifications of course will carry over from mobile to desktop. Therefore, most of this video I want to focus on N32. So N32, the names are somewhat tentative. Now, this of course could change before release, but I'm going to give you the names that I've been told so far. The 7800 XT is up to 60 compute units, is basically the fully enabled N32 die, 30 workgroup processors, if you prefer, 16 gigabytes of RAM, that's 256-bit of course, GDDR6, 64 megabytes of Infinity cache, and 285 watt TBP. I've been given different performance figures, but honestly they're quite similar to one another, close to the 6950 XT or similar to a 4070 Ti. Meanwhile, performance targets I've been given, there is a slight range, so I was told close to a 6950 XT to not quite as fast as an RTX 4070 Ti, so a little faster than a 4070, but not quite as fast as the Ti. This is probably going to be dependent on things like driver versions, because obviously newer drivers will improve performance, as well as the state of the silicon which was being tested. Then we have the 7700 XT, 54 compute units, 27 workgroup processors, put an asterisk on that, I'll go into that further in a second, 12 gigabytes of memory on 192-bit bus, 48 megabytes of Infinity cache, and 225 watts. So the performance targets are going to be close to basically competing with the RTX 4060 Ti. So with the 7700 XT, I've actually been given multiple different configurations from this SKU, including also 52 compute units and 26 workgroup processors. An issue with the 27 workgroup processors is obviously it's an odd number, which would be unusual, but two sources have given me this number, so honestly I'm not too sure what's going on with it. I'm reporting the workgroup processor number for the 7700 XT as uncertain for now. As for the mobile N32 parts, things are very similar to the desktop. albeit allegedly with a lower CU variant, potentially 48 compute units with 10 gigabytes of RAM and of course a corresponding bus width. Primary differences of course really will come down, aside from all of that, to things like lower TBP because of the form factor. As for the launch date, well, things have been, let's just say, confusing. Very early reports stated that N32 wouldn't be that far behind 31 and launch possibly late last year or early this year. Now, obviously, this has not happened. So far, it seems Computex is a likely announcement date for the desktop, probably mobile as well. I've been told by one source July is likely the launch date so far. Another person had told me that there's possibly a delay until Q3, but honestly, I'm very skeptical about this. I think AMD are gearing up for the launch at some point or another relatively soon, but honestly, logic doesn't necessarily equal to reality. Let's face it though, Nvidia are cranking out mid-range RTX 40 cards pretty much on a daily basis at this point. Obviously, I'm being a little bit of it, exaggerating a little bit, but AMD will want to fill out its mid-range offerings for RDNA 3 and also its lower end. Frankly though, the RX 6000 series has received a lot of great price cuts and AMD are still promoting it quite heavily. There are some arguments then that AMD may be in less of a rush to launch its mid-range RDNA 3 products, but given the next generation RTX cards are already coming out, things obviously need to change. Now, there are some performance arguments we could make. I just discussed, how N32 is basically similar to N21, but if you were to look at the RTX 4070, reviews have gone live basically now, and honestly speaking, there's not that much difference between it and, let's say, the 3070, the 3080. Yes, of course, there is additional performance there, but if you had, sake of argument, an RTX 3070, would you upgrade? Well, maybe because of the additional VRAM, maybe DLSS 3's frame generation, that type of thing. But, so talk about the desktop N33 parts now. So AMD have already confirmed the specifications of the mobile parts, and the desktop parts are pretty damn similar, albeit essentially just higher power envelopes. It's still PCIe times 8 to my understanding, but it's not like these parts are really going to be taxing the PCIe bus, maybe with something like, I don't know, sampler feedback or something in the future, but for now anyway, it doesn't really matter. So the highest end part is going to be the 7600 XT, 32 compute units, 32 megabytes of Infinity cache, 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory. The bottom end part is the 7500. This is 24 compute units. Now, honestly, I'm hearing that it could get cancelled for desktop. Who knows? AMD are pushing a lot of focus at the moment on their APUs, so I don't know. There is an argument that an APU may make better sense in terms of marketing, but who knows? It's going to depend a lot on what Nvidia and AMD's rivals are doing as well. I also want to talk about a couple of other random rumors / bits of info. I've not verified this yet, so consider this interesting speculation and theories not confirmed. I'm going to do some further digging and see if I can expand this, but Nvidia's lower-end RTX 40 cards may see new variants launch after the initial SKUs. These would feature more VRAM, but very similar specifications. The RTX 4060 and 4050 are being touted here. Honestly, I can see this happening. Nvidia have released multiple different SKUs in the lower end before with different VRAM configurations. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens because it's Nvidia and they do this stuff all the time, but who knows? Intel's Battle Mage potentially leverages a dual issue system, similar to RDNA 3's function. Given Battle Mage's architecture is seen in a number of different products, not just gaming, this could make some level of sense. Also, this is a bit of bonus information because it's just popped up in the news. So Forenix, who are a website which of course focus a lot on Linux, have leaked, well, a patch from Linux. This essentially confirms ADM support for Meteor Lake or L4, but while the report seems to confirm Meteor Lake does support this, I don't actually think Meteor Lake does technically have it. What does that mean? That seems pretty confusing. Well, to my understanding, it's instead for its successor, Arrow Lake. About 2 years ago, Jim over at Adore TV actually referenced L4 cache in a video. I'll try to remember to link it, but you can see a slide on screen. I think it's possible that the execution number of units has changed since he put his video out. There was also a driver referencing 384 execution units, but honestly I do not know the final number. I've been given multiple different numbers at this point, so frankly I don't trust any of them. But what I will say is that I think that L4 references here are for Arrow Lake. Basically, it reuses the IOD of Meteor Lake, hence why in previous videos I'd said things like they are essentially compatible with one another. So there you have it, guys. I think the mid-range offerings from both AMD and Nvidia are going to be very interesting over the next several months. If we look at the RTX 4070, the lowest end SKUs, of course, are going to cost around the $600 mark, of course, depending on your currency conversion. And while that price is certainly not bad, it's also not perhaps as good as what many of us had hoped for. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with the used market, I suspect, over the next several months. The big problem is that with RTX 30 cards, if we were to look at something like the 3070, for example, you don't really have enough VRAM. And RDNA 2, well, of course, ray tracing performance is going to be perhaps not as high as some people would have liked. But then if you were to take a look at a card like the 6800 XT, because you've got that additional VRAM, there are some arguments to be made. It's going to be extremely interesting to see what the marketing is for RDNA 3 going forward. I also am going to be super keen to see what Intel does with Battle Mage. At the end of the day, unfortunately, we still have quite a ways to go until the release date of Battle Mage. Is looking like it's around a year from now, roughly speaking, which basically means that by the time Battle Mage comes on store shelves, it's not going to be that much longer to wait until like RDNA 4 and RTX 50 are, of course, available. So honestly, I think the used market is going to be extremely tempting for many people. And with all of the price cuts that we've seen for various cards, especially in AMD's lineup, ultimately though, one thing is definitely for certain. When it comes to the lower end products, so cards that, you know, traditionally sell in massive volumes, like for example the GTX 1650, whatever, I think that they are, I don't want to say going to be totally phased out, because at the end of the day, if you have a card, sorry, a system which doesn't have a, you know, an iGPU, you're still going to need those discrete cards, and people are still going to want to buy them, but they're certainly not going to be as popular with, you know, APUs coming out from AMD and Intel's own iGPUs becoming a lot more powerful. It's going to be very interesting, to be honest with you, what happens to the market over the next several years. With that said, hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video. If you did, well, it's YouTube, and I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.